I was just listening to some of the previous presenter and remembering the time only a couple of years ago I was in Ottawa myself visiting their rehabilitation project, which is around a similar topic that I want to bring to your audience today. Firstly, a quick introduction. My name is Rosie Hatton. I am here on behalf of UK Parliament's CIO, Tracy Jessup. In fact, we have a CDIO, which is Chief Digital and Information Officer. And I work very closely with Tracy and the team across the Parliamentary Digital Service and the Office of the Chief Digital Information Officer to plan for the future of digital at Parliament. And there's nothing quite like a pandemic to really help people kind of focus the mind about how we might do things a bit differently. So whilst I don't think any of us would have wished the COVID pandemic on proceedings, actually it's brought some opportunities to us to help us in our sort of future gazing. And that's kind of what I do at UK Parliament. I'm I hesitate to say it, I'm kind of a futurologist. It's a terrible word, but my actual title is Head of R&R Futures. And R&R is our restoration and renewal programme, which is similar to the Ottawa Rehabilitation Project. And that is the plan to completely rebuild and revitalise the whole of the Palace of Westminster, which is the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben that most international people would know. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how COVID's affected our plans in that area. So this is going to be a little bit of a whistle-stop tour around planning for the future in Parliament and our digital future. I'm not going to go into the impact of COVID on our day-to-day work, but there's just some quite striking visuals here of the sort of impact the pandemic had on our day-to-day. You'll see empty chambers and remote voting, which I won't touch on today. But I actually wanted just to contextualise that into what is the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, and it's the cornerstone of UK democracy, and never has digital been more in the forefront than when we were having to keep the lights on as such in the Houses of Parliament, Palace of Westminster during the COVID pandemic. But actually, what some people don't recognise is that the palace is itself part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's a Grade 1 listed building of great historical significance. And as well as being a place of great importance nationally and internationally, it's also a workplace for many thousands of people, members of both houses, the Commons and the Lords, their staff, and the officials who run the houses. I'm one of those officials in my capacity today. The first stone for this building was laid in 1840 and it was completed 30 years later, and it took 16 years longer than estimated and overran its project budgets and timescales. It's good to know there's nothing different about project overruns. But back in 2021, you might have heard that there is a huge new programme called R&R, Restoration and Renewal, and that is the programme to renew and restore the palace. The definitions of renewing and restoring is still up for debate, and all of the business cases around that. But at its heart is a desire to bring these buildings up to modern standards, and that includes digital transformation and to comply with, for example, fire, health, safety, etc. legislation. Just a quick one in terms of the building, and I'll hopefully segue that nicely into digital and its digital life. The basements of this building have literally miles of pipes and wires, and our services, the digital services, if you like, that we put into the building to keep the stuff going on the telly and the stuff you're hearing about Boris Johnson and all of those things in the newspapers, those rely on pipes and wires, wires underneath the palace. And as you can see there, they are very, very old and in a bad way. In fact, we've got 7 miles of steam pipes along 250 miles of electrical cables, which have been sort of built on top of those over the years. None of that's documented. And the programme, the Restoration and Renewal Programme, is an external organisation which has been formulated to take over the rebuilding of not only the physical infrastructure of the building, but the digital infrastructure of the building. We're in the planning stages of the programme at the moment, and work isn't expected on site for a few years. but it'll be perhaps 20 or more years before we know quite what digital services are expected in that building. So I just wanted to have a quick look at what future gazing might have been for the Victorians when they were building this building in the original day back in the 1840s. At that time, most of the future gazings the Victorians did was around electricity. That seemed like a really futuristic technology. And in fact, they were very far-sighted to think about technology in the way they did and to make it as fit for purpose as it has been for so long. Because if we look back as to what technology was like 30 years ago for us, there's some little screen shots there that might bring some memories back. I got that Game Boy for my 21st birthday. I had a computer at university, none of my friends did. But so we couldn't possibly imagine what sort of transformation is going to happen, how the digital transformation landscape is going to affect how we're going to want to work in this building in 30 years' time, for example. It's famously difficult to predict the future in technology. And in fact, what you can see there are some visions of what technology might have been thought to look like. And in fact, there's Blade Runner there looking at like 2019. I don't know, some of that stuff is pretty spot on. We don't have replicants running around, I don't think, but we probably do have some of the more mundane technology like video calls and virtual assistants. And in fact, those sorts of things were predicted in those films back then, but it is really, really hard to imagine what 2050 is going to look like. There are shifting demographics. COVID has brought to us hybrid working in a way that we could never have imagined. And in fact, a lot of the work we're doing to get back onto site is just kind of thinking about how we might work in a hybrid way and how we might fold that into the plans we already had for the future of our built environment to take into account things like climate change and demographics changing. And so mindful that it's famously hard to predict future technology, we do have a bit of a sense of what the future might bring for us at Parliament in the UK. That picture looks a little bit more like Ottawa than it does London, but you can get a sense of the sorts of journey we were already feeling ourselves on when we were planning for our future and starting to plan the operating models we might need in order to meet the challenges of delivering value to citizens and members of Parliament and of both houses over this forthcoming period. And whether UK Parliament really is quite ready to take on the possibilities that we glimpsed during COVID, I'm not quite sure, but what we did do is prove that it can be done and it can be really transformational when they want it. So what we're doing is looking at futuring scenarios, looking at what members and customers of Parliament might want in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, spurred on by some of the changes that are coming across through the COVID sort of lessons we've learned. We are starting to engage with people to ask them what the possibilities might be about the way they might use technology in the future. And we're starting to build into our transformation programs now with a bit more evidence than we had before, where it looked like we were just future gazing. Now we're actually saying, okay, if we were going to do this for more than an emergency, what sort of capabilities would we need to build into our technical infrastructure? And just to kind of conclude this section, I just wanted to say we're beginning on rethinking our operating models to work across the programme external to Parliament, which is refurbishing the palace, and also within UK Parliament. It really, this sort of future visioning really challenges the way that Parliament is set up at the moment, and we need to create a really united vision for the way we will work as one in the estate, as opposed to lots of component parts. So really, there are a number of digital transformations that will come from this, and at its heart is a desire, now that COVID has kind of hit us and we've lived through that, is to really build in, to able to early identify it in a very early way and respond to and manage any emerging disruptions that might come. And it may be around COVID and it may be around something else, might not be a pandemic, but we're trying to build future flexibility into the way we create our digital transformation at UK Parliament.